The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for over 500,000 years. Its vast empire stretched across countless star systems, and its influence reached every corner of the galaxy. From the deepest space to the most distant colonies, the Council controlled everything. They had once believed themselves invincible, an unstoppable force that could never be challenged. But there was one thing they never considered: humanity. Long forgotten by the galaxy, Earth's name had faded into myth, a story of a distant world that had once been vibrant, full of life, and now just a whispered memory. But the Council had made one grave mistake. They had forgotten the power of that very world. For centuries, Earth had been nothing more than a memory, lost to time. The humans were gone, their home reduced to a lifeless rock floating in the dark void. The Council, in their arrogance, had wiped every trace of humanity's existence from their minds. They had seen the humans as weak and insignificant, easy prey for those who came before them. But what they didn't know was that humanity had never truly disappeared. It had gone underground, hidden away, biding its time. And now, after centuries of silence, humanity was ready to rise again. On the edge of Council space, a small but powerful human ship appeared without warning. It was sleek, black, and more advanced than anything the Council had ever seen. It moved like a shadow, slipping through the vast emptiness of space, its engines silent, its weapons ready. For a moment, it seemed like a ghost from the past, an illusion, a mistake. But as it grew closer to the core of Council space, the ship's intentions became clear. It was no mistake. This was no ghost. This was humanity, and it had returned. The Galactic Council's reaction was swift, though unsure. Panic rippled through the ranks of the Council. The ship that had appeared from the void wasn't like any they had encountered before. It was old, but it carried a strength that made their most advanced fleets seem like toys. Council leaders scrambled to make sense of it. How could this be? Humanity had been extinct for millennia. Yet, here it was, a human ship, alive and brimming with power. A group of the Council's top leaders gathered in a dark, circular room, their faces lit by the cold, artificial light of the massive holographic display. Around them, the space was filled with the hushed whispers of uneasy minds. Their most trusted scientists and generals were scrambling to analyze the mysterious ship. Is it possible? Could it be a trap? One of the leaders asked, his voice tinged with doubt. No, another leader replied, his voice calm but firm. This is real. We have seen the data. This ship is not a trick. It has traveled across vast distances without any detectable propulsion systems. No ship, not even our best, can do that. This is something beyond us. For a moment, silence hung in the air as the leaders considered the implications of this strange and unexpected development. One of them, a tall, imposing figure, spoke up. We cannot ignore this. If humanity has truly returned, we need to act swiftly. We cannot afford to let them challenge our dominance. A decision was made. The Council would send a fleet to investigate. They would show this human ship their power, remind them of who truly ruled the galaxy. They believed their fleet was invincible, that no single ship, no matter how advanced, could threaten their authority. But the Council had forgotten one crucial thing. Humans had a way of surprising their enemies. As the fleet moved toward the human ship, the tension grew. The Council's fleet was vast, a fleet of warships and fighters designed to crush any resistance. But the human ship, though small in comparison, held an air of calm. It moved as though it had no fear. As the fleet approached, the human ship suddenly stopped. It wasn't a show of force or strength. It was just a simple move, one that sent an eerie message to the Council. The human ship had no need to flee. It had no need to hide. One of the commanders of the fleet ordered the first volley of shots to be fired. The lasers shot toward the human ship, a bright, deadly streak of energy. But just before they could reach their target, the human ship flickered out of sight, disappearing in an instant. The lasers passed through empty space, hitting nothing but the cold vacuum of space. The fleet commanders were stunned. How had the human ship moved so fast? Where did it go? The human ship reappeared in a different part of the fleet. Closer now, its weapons charging up. The Council's fleet had never encountered anything like this. The human ship had moved so fast, it was almost as though it could bend space itself. Before they could react, the human ship unleashed a barrage of powerful energy blasts, hitting multiple ships in the fleet. The first ship exploded in a burst of light, its debris scattering through the void. The Council was in chaos. They had underestimated humanity for so long, thinking them weak and insignificant. But now, as their fleet crumbled, they realized just how wrong they had been. The human ship continued its assault, moving like a shadow, striking fast and hard, leaving destruction in its wake. The message was clear. Humanity was not a species to be forgotten. It was not a species to be dismissed. After 500,000 years of silence, humanity had returned, and it would not rest until it had claimed its place in the galaxy once more. In the quiet of their council chambers, the leaders could feel the weight of their mistake. They had underestimated humanity, thinking them weak and long gone. But now, the galaxy would know the truth. Humanity was back, and the Council's rule was in jeopardy. And as the human ship continued its relentless assault, the Council realized that their arrogance would be their downfall. As the battle raged, the Galactic Council scrambled to recover from the shock of humanity's unexpected return. The once immense fleet of the Council had now become a chaotic mess of shattered ships and desperate retreat. What was supposed to be a simple operation had turned into an unthinkable disaster. The human ship was everywhere, appearing and vanishing like a wraith, striking with surgical precision. Every blow was devastating, leaving the Council's finest vessels in ruins, their once proud armor now little more than twisted metal and floating debris. The commanders of the fleet could hardly believe their eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to be the unstoppable force, the supreme rulers of the galaxy. And yet here they were, flailing against a single human ship. The questions began to pile up, each more troubling than the last. How could this ship move with such speed? How could it evade their most advanced tracking systems? Why hadn't they seen this coming? Where did this ship come from? One of the council leaders demanded, his voice tinged with panic. How did they build this? Who are these humans? A senior officer, sweating with anxiety, shook his head in disbelief. We don't know, sir. We've been scanning for weeks, and there were no indications of any human activity. They shouldn't even exist. Their planet was lost, destroyed. Enough. The leader snapped. I don't care about your theories. We need answers, and we need them now. As the meeting continued, a sense of dread settled over the council. It was becoming clear that humanity was not only alive, but was far more advanced than they had ever imagined. The ship, though seemingly ancient, carried technology that was light years ahead of anything the council had developed. The humans were not here to negotiate or make demands. They were here to fight, and they were winning. The council's top scientists were called in to examine the wreckage of the destroyed ships. They couldn't believe the reports. The damage was unlike anything they had ever seen. The human ship didn't just destroy their ships. It completely disabled their systems, rendering their weapons and shields useless in an instant. It was as though the human ship knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum destruction. This is impossible, one of the scientists muttered, staring at the readings on his console. Their technology. It's beyond anything we've encountered. It's as if they've mastered energy manipulation on a scale we can't even comprehend. We're not just dealing with a ship, we're dealing with something different. Meanwhile, the human ship continued its assault, now targeting the heart of the council's fleet. It moved swiftly through the chaos, almost like a predator hunting its prey. The council's flagship, a massive warship known for its invulnerability, was the next target. The crew aboard the flagship was still reeling from the earlier devastation, but they didn't have time to recover. The human ship had already locked onto them, and it was too late to evade. The flagship's captain barked orders to engage the ship in combat, but their weapons fired only to see the blasts deflected by an unseen force. The human ship seemed to vanish and reappear with terrifying speed. Each time it appeared, it delivered a crushing blow to the flagship, weakening it further. "This ship, it's not following the rules," the captain said, his voice trembling with frustration. "It's breaking all the laws of space combat. How can they do this?" In the chaos, the Council's top leaders sat helplessly, their once confident demeanor now replaced with a dawning realization. Humanity had come for them, and there was no escaping the consequences. The fleet was falling apart. The flagship was about to be destroyed. And it was clear that the Council had severely underestimated humanity's ability to strike back. One leader, a woman known for her ruthless efficiency, turned to the others with grim determination. "We cannot lose control of this. If we do, it will not just be the loss of a battle. It will be the end of the Council's reign. We need to stop them. Now. Send in reinforcements, full force." But even as she spoke, the damage was already done. The human ship had disabled their communications and was now broadcasting a message across the entire fleet. It was simple, yet chilling. "Your reign is over. Earth is back. The galaxy will remember who you forgot." The message echoed throughout the fleet, sending a ripple of terror through the remaining ships. The Council's power was being crushed beneath the weight of their own ignorance. They had ruled for so long, believing that their dominance was unquestionable. But now, with humanity's wrath unleashed, the very foundation of their empire was crumbling. As the battle reached its peak, the leaders of the Galactic Council knew there was no way to reverse the tide. The human ship continued its relentless assault, picking off the remnants of their fleet one by one. The Council had once thought themselves invincible, but now they were faced with the stark truth. Humanity had returned, and they were not going to back down. The remaining ships of the fleet scattered, retreating as fast as they could, but it was no use. The human ship was too fast, too powerful, and far too determined. It hunted them down, one by one, until nothing remained of the once feared fleet but wreckage drifting in the void. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council was forced to admit defeat. They had made a mistake, a huge mistake, and now the galaxy would witness the wrath of humanity, a wrath that had been building for over 500,000 years. The humans had returned not just to reclaim their place in the stars, but to show the Council and every other species in the galaxy that humanity would never be forgotten again. As the remnants of the once mighty Galactic Council's fleet drifted through space, broken and shattered, the truth of humanity's wrath began to sink in across the galaxy. For centuries, the Council had ruled with an iron fist, believing they were untouchable, that no force in the universe could challenge their power. But now, the galaxy had witnessed the unthinkable. A single human ship had crippled their entire fleet, and they were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered empire. News of the attack spread quickly. The galaxy, once unified under the rule of the Council, now stood divided. Some systems rallied to the Council's defense, eager to maintain the status quo, while others began to question the once unquestionable authority of the Galactic Council. But one thing was certain. The return of humanity had shaken the foundation of the galaxy. And it wasn't just the power of the human ship that had everyone on edge. It was the message it carried. Humanity was not the broken, forgotten species the Council had assumed. No, the humans had not only survived, they had evolved, adapted, and grown stronger in the shadows of the galaxy. They had been waiting, biding their time, and now they were ready to reclaim what had once been taken from them. The Galactic Council's brutal rule had gone unchecked for far too long, and humanity's return was the reckoning the galaxy never saw coming. The Council's leaders gathered in a high-security chamber, their faces grim, their minds racing with what had just transpired. The flagship had been destroyed, their fleet scattered, their once immense military might shattered. They had underestimated the humans, believing that their disappearance from the galactic stage had made them weak, irrelevant. But in doing so, they had made a fatal mistake. "We have underestimated them," one leader spoke softly, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. This was not just a random attack. This was calculated, deliberate. The humans, they'd been planning this for far longer than we realized. Another leader, his hands clenched into fists, stood up sharply. "How did they do it? We had every sensor in place. We monitored every ship. How could we have missed such a powerful force?" "We missed it because we didn't believe it could be true," the first leader replied bitterly. "We dismissed them, wiped them from our records. We erased them from history itself. And now, they've come back with a vengeance." The room fell silent. The weight of the failure hung in the air like a storm cloud, each leader struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. They had lived under the illusion of invincibility for so long that the truth of their vulnerability was almost too much to bear. Humanity was not just a threat. They were the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever faced. As the council leaders deliberated, their once unshakable authority was now questioned by the rest of the galaxy. The people of the galaxy had always known the council's reputation for cruelty and control. Under their rule, countless species had been subjugated, their freedoms stripped away, their planets exploited for resources. But the humans had never been part of that story. They had been cast aside, forgotten, erased from the galaxy's memory. Now, the Council was being forced to reckon with the consequences of their actions. While the Council met in their chambers, far from the heart of the galaxy, the humans were busy preparing for what came next. They had not come back simply to destroy the Council's fleet. They had come for much more. The ship that had struck fear into the heart of the galaxy was merely the beginning. Humanity had an agenda, and it was one that the Council could not afford to ignore. Aboard the human ship, the commander, a seasoned veteran of wars long past, stood at the helm, watching the dark expanse of space unfold before him. His eyes were cold, his mind focused. He knew what needed to be done. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, and that was a mistake they would not live to regret. He turned to his crew, the men and women who had fought beside him through countless battles. "We have made our mark, but this is just the start. The Council has controlled the galaxy for too long, and we will not stop until we have taken back what is rightfully ours." The crew nodded, their expressions steely with resolve. They had seen the destruction they had caused, the chaos they had unleashed, but they knew there was more to do. The Council had to be brought to its knees, and humanity had to reclaim its place among the stars. The ship was just one weapon in their arsenal, and the commander knew that the galaxy would soon be on fire with the flames of humanity's wrath. Elsewhere in the galaxy, rumors of the human ship spread like wildfire. Planets that had once been under the heel of the Council now began to question their loyalty. Rebel groups that had been crushed long ago saw a flicker of hope, a spark that had been reignited by humanity's return. The galaxy was waking up, and the Council's stranglehold on the stars was beginning to slip. A shadow of uncertainty loomed over the galaxy, and the Council's grip on power was slipping faster than they could have ever imagined. Systems that had once been loyal to the Council began to stir, their leaders unsure of which side to take. The human ship had shown them something they had long forgotten: the power of defiance, the strength of the forgotten. And that was a force the Council could no longer ignore. Back in the Council's war room, the leaders were in a state of panic. They had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back. They had assumed that a single ship was all humanity could muster, but they had been gravely wrong. The humans had more than one ship. They had more than one weapon, and they had the will to use them all. "What do we do now?" one of the leaders asked, his voice trembling. "Do we send more fleets? Do we risk everything?" The leader at the head of the table slammed his fist down on the surface, his frustration boiling over. "We have no choice but to fight. We cannot let them take control of the galaxy. If we do, we will be nothing more than a footnote in history." But as he spoke those words, a chilling realization settled over the room. The Council's power was no longer absolute. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The war that had just begun would reshape the galaxy in ways they could never have imagined. And in the end, the Council would have to answer for their greatest mistake, the one they had made 500,000 years ago, when they thought humanity was gone forever. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. The once unified Galactic Council, which had held sway over countless systems for eons, was now facing an unprecedented crisis. The human ship, which had already wreaked havoc on their fleet, was only the beginning. The shockwaves from humanity's sudden reappearance were felt across the galaxy, rattling the foundations of the Council's power. The Council had always relied on their technology and the vast numbers of their fleets to maintain their dominance. But against the humans, those advantages were proving useless. The human ship had shattered their most advanced defenses with a precision and skill that no one had expected. Their once mighty warships were nothing more than drifting hulks, easy prey for the deadly human vessel. And now, in the wake of their defeat, the Council leaders were grappling with the fallout of their mistake. The leaders of the Council convened in emergency sessions, their faces drawn with worry, their voices hushed with fear. They had never seen anything like this before. A species they thought had been wiped out, reduced to nothing but a footnote in galactic history, had returned to deliver a crushing blow to their empire. They had made a grave error in underestimating humanity, and now it was clear that the cost of that mistake was far higher than any of them had imagined. "We need to act quickly," one of the leaders said, his voice edged with panic. "We can't afford to let them take any more ground. If they continue on this path, they'll destroy everything we've built." A senior military strategist, his face pale from stress, nodded grimly. "The human ship has already crippled our fleet. We have no choice but to send in reinforcements, but even that may not be enough. We've underestimated their capabilities. We're dealing with a force that's unlike anything we've encountered before." The Council leader, who had once been the most confident in their victory, slammed his fist onto the table, sending a shockwave of frustration through the room. "I told you this would happen. I told you not to underestimate the humans. And now look where we are. The galaxy is in turmoil, and we're on the brink of losing everything." But even as the Council argued among themselves, the human ship was already moving, slipping through the stars like a shadow, striking at the heart of the Council's remaining power. It wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol, a beacon of humanity's defiance. And its commander was no ordinary leader. He was a seasoned warrior, a man who had lived through the hardships of Earth's darkest days and emerged stronger for it. His crew, too, was composed of the finest humanity had to offer, each one dedicated to seeing their mission through to the end. As the human ship entered the heart of the Council's territories, it broadcast a simple message to the entire galaxy. "The Council's reign ends here. Earth is back, and we will not be forgotten." The words were a declaration of war, not just against the Council, but against anyone who had ever thought humanity weak or inconsequential. The galaxy had forgotten Earth, but humanity had not forgotten the galaxy. And now, the time for reckoning had arrived. Meanwhile, on Council-controlled planets, fear gripped the population. Those who had once supported the Council's iron grip on the galaxy now found themselves questioning their loyalty. The news of the human ship's attack had spread quickly, and rumors of humanity's return were everywhere. Some saw it as a sign of hope, a chance to break free from the Council's control. Others were terrified, wondering what consequences the humans would bring with them. On one such planet, a small group of rebels had been hiding in the shadows for years, their movements suppressed by the Council's relentless hunt. But now, with humanity's message echoing through the galaxy, they saw an opportunity. The humans had come for the Council, and in doing so, they had ignited a fire that burned brightly in the hearts of those who had been oppressed for so long. One of the rebel leaders, a woman named Aria, stood before a small gathering of her fellow fighters. "This is our chance," she said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and fear. "The Council's grip is weakening. They're distracted, disorganized. We have to strike while the iron is hot. If we join forces with the humans, we can finally break free from their tyranny." Her words stirred the group, and in that moment, the tide began to turn. Rebel cells on other planets began to rise up, inspired by the humans' message. The galaxy was no longer under the thumb of the Council. Humanity's wrath had awakened something deep within the hearts of those who had suffered under the Council's rule. The oppressed were no longer content to remain silent. They were ready to fight back. As the human ship continued its assault, the commander watched the unfolding chaos with a calm intensity. He knew that the first battle was just the beginning. The Council would try to retaliate, of course. They were powerful, they were resourceful. But humanity had something they lacked: unity, purpose, and an unshakable will to survive. "Our message has been sent," the commander said to his crew. "But this war will be long. The Council is not going to give up easily. We need to prepare for everything they throw at us." The crew nodded, their faces hardening with resolve. They had come a long way from the forgotten days of Earth, and they would stop at nothing to see their mission through. The war for the galaxy was just beginning, and the humans were ready to lead it. Back in the Council's chambers, the leaders were still grappling with the scale of the disaster. The human ship had become more than just an enemy. It had become a symbol of rebellion, a rallying cry for those who had long been oppressed. And that was something the Council could not afford. If they didn't act fast, they would lose everything. "We must strike back," the leader at the head of the table declared. "We will assemble every fleet we can and crush them before they gain any more momentum. We cannot allow them to spread their rebellion across the galaxy." But deep down, they all knew the truth. The Council's power was no longer unchallenged. Humanity had returned, and they had brought with them a force the galaxy had never seen before. And in the end, the Council's most fatal mistake had been believing that humanity had been lost to the ages. Now, humanity was coming for them, and there was no escape. The Council's desperation had reached a boiling point. Their fleets had been decimated, their strongest defenses torn apart by the unrelenting attacks of humanity's lone warship. Across the galaxy, the remnants of their power were crumbling. Every planet they controlled seemed to be slipping away, its inhabitants rising up in rebellion. Humanity's return had sparked something deep within the oppressed people, and the Council was no longer the undisputed power it once was. Within the Council's war room, tension filled the air as leaders from all corners of the galaxy gathered to discuss their next move. Their once proud empire was unraveling before their eyes. The human ship had struck them with the precision of a predator, and now it seemed to be everywhere. No system was safe. The Council was no longer in control. It was clear to everyone in that room that humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting to take back their place in the galaxy. "We have to respond. We can't let them continue to humiliate us," one of the leaders growled, his voice tinged with both fear and anger. "But how?" another leader asked, his tone almost defeated. "Our fleet is in ruins. We have nothing left but a few scattered forces, and we can't even predict where they'll strike next." A heavy silence fell over the room as every member of the Council realized the full scope of their failure. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. No one had anticipated this kind of fight. No one had expected humanity to rise from the ashes with such ferocity. On the human side, the commander stood at the helm of his ship, watching the chaos unfold on the screens before him. He knew that the first strike had been a success, but he also knew that this was just the beginning. The war had just started. His crew, a mix of hardened soldiers and scientists, were all deeply committed to the cause. There was no turning back now. The commander addressed his crew with a calm but determined voice. "This is our moment. The galaxy has forgotten us, but we haven't forgotten them. We fight for our home. for our people, and for every world that has been crushed under the Council's heel. We will make them remember humanity. The crew's morale was high, but they also knew that the battles ahead would be brutal. The Council would not simply lie down and accept defeat. They were powerful, resourceful, and ruthless. The human warship had been a blow to their pride, but the Council would not let it be the end. As the human ship moved through the galaxy, it continued to spread its message. The transmission that had echoed throughout the stars was a call to arms, a promise that humanity was back, and they would never be silenced again. The Council's mistake was not just a military blunder. It had ignited a fire in the hearts of billions who had suffered for so long. The oppressed were rising up. They saw the humans as their champions, their last hope for freedom. Back on a remote planet, far from the front lines of the conflict, a young resistance leader named Tessa was preparing for an assault. The news of humanity's return had sparked something in her, something fierce and unyielding. For years, she and her fellow fighters had been battling the Council's forces, always outnumbered, always on the run. But now, with humanity on the offensive, the tables had turned. "We can do this," Tessa said to her team, her voice steady and filled with determination. "The Council is weak. We've been fighting them for years, but now we have an ally. Humanity. We'll join forces, take the fight to them, and we'll free this galaxy once and for all." Her words stirred the group. In that moment, they all understood that this was their chance. Humanity's wrath had opened a door to victory, and they would charge through it with everything they had. Back in the Council's war room, the leaders were frantically scrambling to devise a strategy. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, but now they would have to find a way to strike back. They were no longer fighting a simple rebellion. They were facing a full-scale war, one that would test everything they had. And they knew, deep down, that if they lost this war, they would lose everything. "We need to consolidate our forces," one leader suggested, his voice strained with urgency. "We'll form an alliance with the other races loyal to us. We can't face humanity alone." Another leader nodded grimly. "Agreed, but it may not be enough. The humans are not like the other species we've conquered. They are unified, driven by a cause. They are not afraid to die for it. We have to prepare for the worst." Outside the Council chambers, a storm was brewing. The galaxy was shifting. The fight for the future had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. As the human ship continued its relentless advance, the commander knew that the next phase of the war would be the most difficult. The Council would pull out all the stops, throw every resource they had into the conflict. But humanity had one thing the Council did not. They had the will to fight. They had been tested, broken, and rebuilt, and they would not stop until the galaxy had learned to fear them, just as it had once feared the Council. The commander looked out at the stars, the weight of the responsibility settling on his shoulders. "We've started something that can't be undone. There's no turning back, but we will win, and the galaxy will remember who we are." The human ship forged ahead, a beacon of defiance in the darkness, while the Council's once unstoppable might began to crumble beneath the weight of humanity's fury. The stakes had never been higher, and both sides knew that the battle for the galaxy had only just begun.